Russian units suffering heavy losses on the ground have been forced to return to Belarus and Russia to reorganize and resupply, Britain's defense ministry said early Wednesday morning. The development demonstrates the difficulties Russia is having reorganizing its units in forward areas within Ukraine, it said. However, the defense ministry warned that Russia would likely compensate for its reduced capability on the ground through mass artillery and missile strikes. That comes as both U.S. and Ukrainian officials have expressed skepticism over claims from Russia Tuesday that it would drastically reduce military operations around Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. The vow was made as peace talks unfolded in Istanbul. President Joe Biden said he would not read anything into the claims until I see what their actions are. He said the U.S. had no plans to withdraw sanctions or military aid to Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukrainian counterpart President Volodymyr Zelensky said that while there were positive signals from ongoing negotiations, they did not drown out the ruptures of Russian shells. On Wednesday, the United Nations Refugee Agency said the number of people who have fled the war in Ukraine has reached more than 4 million, with over 2.3 million seeking refuge in neighboring Poland. Russian forces have struck more than 30 residential buildings and pieces of infrastructure in the Kyiv region over the past 24 hours, the Kyiv Regional State Administration said on Telegram. The strikes came despite statements by Moscow that it would scale down military operations around Kyiv and in the northern city of Chernihiv. The shelling took place mainly in towns northwest and west of the capital, including in Hostomel, Bucha and Makariv, according to the region's post. The night passed relatively calmly, to the sounds of sirens and the sound of gunfire from battles around the city, but there was no shelling in the city itself, Kyiv's deputy mayor Mykola Povoroznik said on Ukrainian TV, according to Reuters. Earlier, Ukrainian presidential advisor Alexei Arestovich said on TV that Russia is transferring its forces from Kyiv and the north of Ukraine to the east and near the besieged southern port city of Mariupol. According to the World Food Programme, 45% of Ukraine's population is worried about finding enough food to eat, with 1 in 5 reducing the size and number of their own meals to ensure their children can eat. We're talking about a catastrophe on top of a catastrophe, WFP Executive Director David Beasley told the UN on Tuesday. It's not just decimating Ukraine and the region. It will have a global impact beyond anything we've seen since World War II, he said. The WFP is providing cash assistance, freshly baked bread, ready-to-eat food across the country, it said in a statement on Wednesday. The conflict in Ukraine is driving food prices high across the globe, which further limit access to food for millions of people, it said. In a country which used to grow food for 400 million people around the world, 1 person in 5 now reports having to reduce the size and number of their meals while adults skip meals so their children can eat, it said. The WFP said it required $590 million to assist millions of people affected by the crisis. The death toll of a strike Tuesday morning that hit a regional government building in Mykolaiv has risen to 12 people, the State Emergency Service of Ukraine has said. In a Telegram post on Wednesday, the emergency service said rescue efforts were still underway. It said the bodies of a dozen victims had so far been pulled out of the rubble. At least 33 people were also injured, with 18 rescued, the emergency service said. On Tuesday, Regional Governor Vitaly Kim said on Telegram that his personal office was destroyed in the attack. He said most people appeared to have survived the assault, however. India is gearing up for a week of high-level individual visits by top officials from US, UK, Germany, Mexico, and Russia. US Deputy National Security Advisor Dileep Singh, UK Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, Mexican Foreign Secretary Marcelo Ebrard, German Foreign and Security Policy Advisor Jens Plotner will all meet Indian officials this week in New Delhi. Singh, who's traveling on Wednesday and Thursday, will consult closely with counterparts on the consequences of Russia's unjustified war against Ukraine and mitigating its impact on the global economy, National Security Council spokesperson Emily Horne said in a statement on Tuesday. While no joint meetings between the delegations have been announced, Ukraine is expected to remain the top agenda as New Delhi faces monumental pressure from the West on its continued relationship with Moscow. The United Nations named 3 human rights experts on Wednesday to investigate possible war crimes in Ukraine, where Russia has been accused of indiscriminate bombardment of civilians. The independent panel, led by Erik Mose of Norway, will probe all accusations of rights abuses and violations of international humanitarian law in the context of the aggression against Ukraine by the Russian Federation, a statement said. The UN Human Rights Council has created the Commission of Inquiry for 1 year at the request of Ukraine and allies, including the European Union, Britain, and the United States. The panel will interview witnesses and collect forensic material for any future legal proceedings. It is to report initial findings in September. Mose is a former judge of the European Court of Human Rights and former president of the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, who also served as a judge on Norway's Supreme Court. Other panel members are Jasminka Jamhur, the human rights ombudsperson of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Pablo de Graef, a Colombian who was the first UN justice investigator. Russia is transferring its forces from Kyiv and the north of Ukraine to the east and near the besieged southern port city of Mariupol, Alexei Arestovich, an advisor to President Volodymyr Zelensky, said. Moscow made the move so its forces could have a qualitative and quantitative advantage and encircle Ukrainian troops, he said. Russia's deputy defense minister said Tuesday that Moscow would scale back its military presence near Kyiv and Chernihiv. There is very heavy fighting there now, Arestovich said on Ukrainian TV of the eastern regions, adding that there was also fighting in Mariupol, where the city is half captured and there are heavy street fights happening. For weeks, Russian forces have surrounded Mariupol, causing widespread destruction in residential areas and leaving residents in a grave humanitarian situation. Germany declared an early warning Wednesday that it could be heading towards a gas supply emergency amid demands from Russia that it be paid for energy supplies in rubles. Federal Economy Minister Robert Habeck triggered the early warning, saying the measure was designed to prepare for a possible disruption or stoppage of natural gas flows from Russia. Under Germany's current gas emergency plan, the early warning level is the first of 3 stages. Habeck said supplies were safeguarded for the time being and said Germany was closely monitoring supply flows with market operators. Nevertheless, we must increase precautionary measures to be prepared for an escalation on the part of Russia, he said. The economy minister said that with the declaration of the early warning level, a crisis team has convened. It comes after Russia demanded that Germany and other nations pay for energy supplies in rubles as Moscow contends with the economic impacts of Western sanctions over its invasion of Ukraine. International Atomic Energy Agency Director General Rafael Grossi promised technical assistance to help prevent the possibility of a nuclear accident as he met with government officials and staff at a power plant in Ukraine Wednesday. We are ready to support you in whatever way and form we can. That nothing that happens here will be unnoticed, he told staff at the South Ukraine nuclear power plant based near the city of Yuzhnokrinsk in Mykolaiv province. Because the IAEA will be here to support and to say whenever there is a problem. In a separate Twitter post, Grossi, who reached Ukraine on Tuesday, wrote that the IAEA's on-site presence would help prevent the danger of a nuclear accident that could have severe public health and environmental consequences in and beyond Ukraine. NBC News saw dozens of families at border crossings and in train stations in southeastern Poland, carrying crates with dogs, cats and other pets with them from Ukraine. Many said they could not bear leaving them behind because they are not just pets, but family members, and would be in danger in Ukraine. On Wednesday, the United Nations Refugee Agency said the number of people fleeing Ukraine since Russia launched its invasion had reached more than 4 million, with more than 2.3 million fleeing to neighboring Poland. Kyiv has improved its negotiating position with Moscow from where it stood even before the start of the war in February, Ukrainian presidential advisor Alexei Arestovich said. Serious success has been achieved, he said in a post on Facebook early Wednesday. We improved our position in all respects, he added. He pointed to Russia's military struggles in Ukraine as the reason for the success in the negotiations. Russian and Ukrainian negotiators met Tuesday in Istanbul for a round of peace talks, and Moscow said that it would scale back its military presence near Kyiv. Arestovich warned, however, that despite Ukraine's success at the negotiating table, the war was not over. Negotiations will in no way slow down the war and will not cancel it, he said. This is a separate line that prepares a future peace agreement because any war, even a 100-year war, ends with a peace agreement. The number of refugees who have fled the war in Ukraine has reached more than 4 million, the United Nations Refugee Agency has said. In an update Wednesday morning, the UNHCR said at least 4,019,287 have fled the country since Russia launched its invasion into Ukraine. More than half of those who have fled, over 2.3 million, have sought refuge in neighboring Poland. Meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of others have fled to Romania, Moldova, Hungary, and Slovakia. More than 300,000 people have also ended up in Russia, while more than 10,000 have arrived in Belarus. A number of other nations have also taken in refugees fleeing the crisis, with Germany, Ireland, and the UK among them. Russian forces shelled the northern city of Chernihiv the whole night, the governor of the region said on Telegram Wednesday. The shelling came less than a day after Russia said that it would scale down its military activity near the capital Kyiv and Chernihiv. The enemy demonstrated a decrease in activity in the Chernihiv region by striking Nizhyn, including by air, and spent the whole night hitting Chernihiv, regional governor Vyacheslav Chas said in a post on Telegram. In fact, the enemy roamed Chernihiv all night. Since the early stages of the war, Chernihiv has come under heavy assault from Russian forces, who have also encircled the city. Their military progress, however, had largely stalled. At least one person is dead after Russian forces were accused of firing on residential neighborhoods in the Luhansk region on Wednesday morning, Ukrainian authorities have said. In a Telegram post, Suri Haidai, the governor of Luhansk region, said Russian forces had fired on residential neighborhoods in one of the Lysychansk districts of the Luhansk region. There are a lot of blockages. Rescuers are trying to save the living, he said. According to the State Emergency Service of Ukraine, at least one person died in the attack. 5 people have been rescued with 8 already evacuated to safety, it said in a post on Telegram. The State Emergency Service said information about the dead and injured was still being clarified. Russian units suffering heavy losses have been forced to return to Belarus and Russia to reorganize and resupply, Britain's defense ministry has said. In an intelligence update early Wednesday morning, the defense ministry said such activity was putting further pressure on Russia's already strained logistics and demonstrates the difficulties Russia is having reorganizing its units in forward areas within Ukraine. It warned that Russia would likely continue to compensate for the reduced capability on the ground through mass artillery and missile strikes. The statement added that Russia's proclaimed focus on an offensive in Donetsk and Luhansk was likely a tacit admission that it is struggling to sustain more than one significant axis of advance. 3 humanitarian corridors have been agreed to for the evacuation of Mariupol and Melitopol residents and delivery of humanitarian aid, Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk announced on Wednesday. In a Telegram post she said that the corridors will deliver aid to the city of Berdyansk and will clear the way for people traveling using their own transport from Enerhodar to Zaporizhia. On the way back to the city of Zaporizhia, people from Berdyansk and Melitopol will be able to join the humanitarian columns in their own vehicles, she said.